this is the chart of Bitcoin, right? So we're going to quickly cover a little Bitcoin, then we'll jump back to some stocks out there. But what I want to show you here is, again, there's a tendency to understand how to read charts, and I want you guys to become better and better at this. And so what we have here, guys, you can see how here was a green candle. This was on the XRP news, right? The SEC judges ruling mainly against the SEC for Ripple, and we saw the reversal the next day. When you see a reversal of a move, I don't care if it's down up or up down in a candles chart, that is a very bearish reversal, or in this case, it's bearish reversal, right? So here we had an up candle, and then the very next candle, we went right down to the downside. All right, so right back down here, guys. Again, when you reverse, the faster you reverse a move in its entirety, the more negative it is. So let's jump ahead here. Looking down here, guys, here you had an up candle, right? And here it took 2 candles to reverse. Is that bullish or bearish? Well, this was the most bearish, right? When it reverses on 1, it's the most bearish. When it reverses on 2, it's still bearish. It's just not quite as bearish. Take it into a situation like this. You have an up move, and then what if it goes like this, and this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 candles? That's a lot less bearish. In fact, that's a bull flag, or in spirit of bull flag. So what you want to pay attention to is if a move reverses, how fast does it reverse? And you gauge the bullishness or bearishness of that based on how fast it reverses. All right, so that's an interesting little tidbit that I wanted to just show you guys here. And again, let's just jump back here real quick. So a couple other things I want to talk about with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just struggling right now. It's still a negative bias based on the reversal we saw. It's still hovering in this lower range. And let me just zoom out here a little bit. All right, so what we know here, and again, just going over this chart here, we know that this is a pivot support, which are essentially we're at right here. Then we have support and support. Now, I will say this. The negativity in Bitcoin is starting to get to a level where it almost makes me start being short-term bullish. Now, we're not there yet, but I will say this, is that the bearishness amongst investors is basically at an unparalleled level, in my opinion, during this cycle. Like, the fact that we've reversed the BlackRock news, the Ripple news, and the news on Grayscale, that has broken the will of a lot of investors in Bitcoin. That's what I want to see to start getting maybe a little bullish. Now, it doesn't mean I don't think there's still some downside. I still do think that. But on a swing trade basis, I'm starting to pay attention to that negativity, and it makes me be the opposite in more of a bullish nature. So, for instance, if we were to float down to 20, let's just say we get to 20, I would almost say if we went like this, I'm going long. I'm actually going to go long here. Now, again, is this going to be a hodl position or a swing trade? Right now, swing trade, because I need to reevaluate. I have to keep an eye on the stock market. You guys know my thesis for us actually breaking these lows is tied to the U.S. stock market rolling over in a major way. All right, so that's something I wanted to show you guys, but just be aware that sentiment is very, very important, but it's very hard to gauge. I've been doing this for 24 years, and I've barely got a handle on gauging sentiment. Sentiment is very hard. I use social media to my advantage. All right, when I tweet something negative out there, if I get a lot of people agreeing with me and no one bashing me, you know what? That makes me actually think more bullishly. And you can use it when you have a big following, you can actually use it. When I tweet something bearish and everyone attacks me, it makes me more bearish. By the way, right up here. All right, I was saying 31, 32,000 wasn't going to go, and I got crushed. Anytime I tweeted about this, I got crushed. It made me right? I mean, it basically made me say, okay, that's probably going to be, I'm probably going to be correct on this. So just things to think about. I just want you guys to be aware of this stuff. All right, keep on going. I want to show you something else here on the charts. I want to go to the SMH. Now, on the SMH chart, I added in my RSI. We're going to talk a little RSI divergences today. We're going to do some education on this side. All right, so what I want to bring to your attention is the kind of the mimicking potentially of a Bitcoin top in the SMH. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, basically what we can see here is that you have this sort of pattern up, down, up, with a slightly higher high here than here, right? Slightly higher high. Now, listen, it could be negated if we go back above. Right now, we are trading a little bit down on the semis. I saw on video was down slightly this morning. But this pattern, if it were to roll over, would be a perfect replication of what we saw in the Bitcoin chart, right? So if we flip back and I bring up my Bitcoin chart, let's go over here and we zoom out to the cycle high here, right? Same exact type of thing. Up, down, up, higher high, okay? And then the collapse. And so what I'm doing here is I'm drawing a parallel. Now, I want to be clear. Markets don't always replicate. Sometimes they rhyme, sometimes they mimic, sometimes they don't do any of the sorts. But the key is understanding charts. And charts are representation of you and me, humans. We are traders. We are buying, we are selling. We are buying, we are selling. We are buying, buying, selling, etc. So again, human emotion doesn't change. You go back 5,000 years, human emotion, there was still greed and there was still fear out there. And so again, it's one of the reasons why chart patterns replicate is that it's the same emotion that there was in 1929 or in 1920 or in 1800s or in the 1500s. You know, anytime back in history, it's the same emotion and therefore charts tend to behave the same. All right, so this is the interesting thing on this, right? So let's go back to RSIs and look and see if we can see some other factors here that could alert us to some sort of negative sentiment or reversal. Now, one of the things that I'm seeing on this chart, and I hope you guys can see the RSI down here, I'm going to actually zoom in on just a little bit, right? So one of the things that I look for is with RSIs, I don't really care if they're overbought or oversold, right? This is just a marking point on the chart. Over 70 is overbought, under 30 is oversold. Now, again, I've seen charts that are basically oversold for long periods of time. You want to look for the divergences. What is a divergence? Let's take a look. A divergence is where you have a high here and you make a higher high here, but if we look at the RSI here, which mimics that high or matches to that high, and then we look at the RSI over here, there is a down-sloping trend line there. So essentially you have a higher pivot high here, even though this was a higher high. So again, look at this. If I draw a trend line here, it's slightly upsloping. This is slightly downsloping with the RSI. This would be considered a negative divergence. So you have a negative divergence from peak to peak, so high to higher high, high to lower high, and that is your negative divergence that I see in the chart. Okay, so you say, okay, well, it's a negative divergence. Where do we connect the dots with the Bitcoin chart when the cycle made its high? Let's bring up BTC. Let's see what we got on BTC here. All right, so on BTC, right, if we zoom out on this chart and we go to a bigger time frame here, okay, and bear with me as I kind of try to zoom in as much as I can on this high pivot. All right, so here we have Bitcoin. And with Bitcoin, we already know what the resulting move was. So let's test our thesis. Here's your high on the RSI, matching those highs, right? Now, if we go to this high, which was clearly higher, right? This was 65,000, this was 69,000. Look at this, lower RSI. Look at that, but higher high. So what this tells us here is that on Bitcoin, when you made this pattern, which again, we're only right here on the SMH. So again, we don't know if it's going to fully do this, but you have the same indicators, higher high, lower high, high, lower, lower high. And again, that again is a negative divergence. So the same sort of things are replicating in the charts. And I just want to point this out. My job is to deliver you guys education, data, insights, all of these things. You take it, you do what you want with it. That's your prerogative. I'm here to educate and inform.